I can tell that the decorating committee has been here because the pulpit is covered in glitter. But pretty much everything in this church at this point is covered with glitter. You can't walk out of here without it being covered in glitter at this point. But that's a good thing. It reminds us that we are entering into the Christmas season as we begin our celebration of Advent over the next few Sundays and into Christmas Eve. And so it is a great time of the year, one that I definitely enjoy. And I would ask you this morning, if you would, to turn to the book of Joshua again. We continue our examination of the allotment process that's taking place that Joshua records in these chapters. And this morning we're going to look at chapters 18 and 19 together that comprise a single pericope. You could argue that it's multiple pericopes and that each of the individual tribes is a single pericope, but there's a sense in which there's a surrounding fence, if you will, around these two chapters. What we have in chapters 18 and 19 are the final allocation of the land in Canaan to the tribes of Israel. The process began in chapter 15 and continued through chapter 17. So we've already seen the tribe of Judah allocated land in the southern part of Canaan, the first and largest territory in that space. And then following that, the people of Joseph, the tribes of Ephraim and West Manasseh, are given a large section in central Canaan, which we looked at last week. And then today we're going to look at the allocation of the land to the remaining 7 tribes. Those remaining 7 tribes who are to be allocated land on the western side of the Jordan. Now, here's how this is going to work. There's 3 parts to this section. First, we will see the unallocated space divided into 7 separate areas by representatives of the remaining tribes. So the first 9 verses, we're going to see this allocation being divided up. And then the 7 divisions that are decided upon will be apportioned out by lot. And that will start in 1810 and go all the way through 1948. So the bulk of the 2 chapters. And then finally at the end, in just a few verses, 49 to 51, an allotment for Joshua is specified at the end of chapter 19. So those are the 3 parts we're going to look at this morning. So let's start in chapter 18. And we'll begin in verse 1, where it says, "The whole congregation of the people of Israel assembled at Shiloh and set up the tent of meeting there. The land lay subdued before them." Now, I need you to pause and note something here before we get into this allocation. This is the first mention of Shiloh in the Old Testament. It's the first mention of the place where the tabernacle is set up. Shiloh becomes the permanent location of the tabernacle until the days of David. This is where the tabernacle will reside with the ark in it all the way to the days of David. The Philistines will capture the ark from Shiloh in the days of David, about 400 years from this point. So Shiloh is going to become the place where the tabernacle is going to be situated. Now, Shiloh is located in the hill country of Ephraim. It's about 20 miles north of Jerusalem. And on your map, you will see I inserted Shiloh. It's not in the original map, but I added it to the map that you have. There's a little red dot in there where Shiloh is at. If you're using the black and white version, my apologies. But Shiloh is in Ephraim, about 20 miles north and east of Jerusalem. The location of the tabernacle once the people arrive in Canaan was to be specified by the Lord himself, according to Deuteronomy 12. God had said to Moses, "I will decide where the tabernacle is to be." So we must assume then that the choice of Shiloh was given to the people of Israel at some point prior to them settling it here at Shiloh. According to Jeremiah 7:12, this is the place that the Lord decided. So somewhere in all of this, the Lord gave that information to the people of Israel, and they set it up here. Which means that Shiloh becomes the worship center of Israel until the temple is built in Jerusalem. So during the theocracy of Israel, meaning during the period of the judges, which, by the way, includes the days of Samuel, because he was the last judge of Israel, the tabernacle at Shiloh is the place where the people of Israel were to come and bring their sacrifices. The sacrifices that Jamie read this morning would be given every Day of Atonement at Shiloh during these years. Up until now, that tent has been wandering with them wherever they go. But now there's a sense in which the people of Israel are settling into this land. They're going to place the tabernacle in a specific place, and now they're going to move in and take these territories. So you're getting the feeling, even in this verse, that there's a permanency here. This is where the allotment of the remaining land was to take place. Now, I could take out that word remaining. This is where the allotment of the land was to take place. I am convinced that Joshua includes this statement here in verse 1 in this narrative at this point, but the tent was probably already set up at Shiloh when he makes this point. I think what he's doing here is he's simply saying, we had set up the temple at Shiloh, and this is where we were casting lots. Remember when we talked about Judah and the sons of Joseph, I made mention of the fact that I thought they were casting lots to do that, even though it's not mentioned. So I think this is the same thing. I think that Joshua simply includes here a statement that they set up the tabernacle at Shiloh and cast lots before the tabernacle in order to decide the various places of the land. And he's simply including it here because the largest portion now, in terms of the number of tribes, that are going to be given land is being carried out at this point. And so he inserts this to remind the reader that all of this allotment process is taking place before the tabernacle at Shiloh, even for Judah and the sons of Joseph. Now, I can't prove any of what I just said from the text. Chronologically, it would look as though the tabernacle only gets set up now after Judah, Ephraim, and West Manasseh are established. That's a possibility. I'm inclined to think, however, that the tabernacle was probably already there and it's already been going on at this point. So, and one of the clues of that is that it says that the land lay subdued before them. I've already said many times that is not a statement to mean that they have conquered all of the Canaanites, killed them all off, and now the land is completely empty of the natives. We know that isn't true. What we know is that the initial conquests that are mentioned under Joshua in the early chapters 10 through 12 have been accomplished far enough that the people are now able to go and take this space and finish extricating the natives. Subdued in this case is not a totality word. It's more of a sense of you're in a position to complete now what needs to be done. It's going to take a while, but nonetheless it is subdued, quote unquote, under Joshua. So I think that statement leads me to the clue that this has already been done. As soon as they finished the conquests, they set up the tabernacle, and then they started the process of doing the allotments. And Joshua just simply includes it here to make sure that we understand that this allotment process that's about to take place is happening at the tabernacle. Now in verse 2 it says, there remained among the people of Israel 7 tribes whose inheritance had not yet been apportioned. So Joshua said to the people of Israel, how long will you put off going in to take possession of the land, which the Lord, the God of your fathers, has given you? He first questions the people, how long will you put off going in to take possession of the land? Now we've talked about this before. The land is yours. It's been laid before you. It's time for you to apportion it and go live in it. The statement seems to imply that there's some hesitancy on the part of the people of Israel, the tribes, to divide up the remaining land. It's almost as though they're like, well, I don't know what to do next and don't know where we're going to go. And there seems to be this hesitancy here. And I think there's this parallel track in the book of Joshua that's hard to explain. But it's almost as though, I think I said this at the end of last week's sermon, Joshua has this great confidence in what God will do in this land, and the people are all standing back going, I don't know. It's kind of like that contradiction between Caleb and the rest of the spies, right? Caleb comes back and says, we could take this land. And the rest of them are going, oh, I don't know. That motif seems to fit in this book all the way along. Joshua is confident, go take this land, it's yours, it belongs to you. Yahweh will finish the work of taking care of the natives. Go by faith into this land, and they don't want to go because they don't have a lot of faith. Now, I could take that and run with it for a half an hour, right? But just point out the reality here. This apportionment is being pushed by Joshua. It's time. Go, take, it's yours. So there seems to be some hesitancy. Now, what he does tell them is something rather odd. He says in verse 4, provide 3 men from each tribe, and I will send them out, that they may set out and go up and down the land. They shall write a description of it with a view to their inheritances, and then come to me. They shall divide it into 7 portions. Okay, I'll stop there. Joshua instructs them here, okay, to spy out the territory and draw up a map of the remaining land in 7 portions, which will then be doled out by lot before the Lord. Verse 6 says, I will cast lots for you here before the Lord our God. Okay? So he tells them to go spy out the territory. Now, here's what I think he's doing here. I think what Joshua does is he gives the remaining tribes a stake in the process by allowing them to draw their own boundaries. Unlike Judah and Joseph, whose boundaries were determined by lot, in this case it would appear that their boundaries, the remaining boundaries, will not be decided by lot. Just the order will be decided by lot, but the actual drawing of each of the boundary areas will be done by them. In other words, 3 men from each of the remaining tribes, the remaining 7 tribes, are to walk throughout the land, writing the description of what they see, and divide it up in a fair manner. Verses 4 and 9. Go and write these things out. See the land, spy it out, draw some map, and then we'll come back and we'll decide who's going to go into each of the 7 slots that you design. So Joshua gives them a stake, in this case, in the process. Now, I just described something, didn't I, that should have brought a remembrance to your mind of something. It should be reminiscent of something. What did God say to Abraham when he said, I'm going to give you this land? He said to him, go walk this land. And wherever your foot touches, that land will be yours. It's very reminiscent of that. It's almost as though Joshua is saying, I want you to understand. I want you to remember what it is that God had promised to your ancient ancestor, the patriarch of your nation. He had promised him this land. I'm going to let you go and do the same thing that God allowed him to do, or commanded him to do is probably a better way to say it, so that you will go and look around and go, this is pretty good land. I think we can live here. Oh, let's make up a spot over here, and then we'll put a spot right over here, and some over here, and some over here, and we'll actually put our eyes on it, we'll put our feet on it, and that will, I would think, Joshua's thinking, that will give them some impetus to want to actually go and occupy it and live in it. That would seem to be what he's attempting to do here. Walk through this land, observe it, see how prosperous it is, and claim it for yourself. Now, in verse 7, verse 6 and 7, a couple things are noted. Verse 5, Judah shall continue in his territory in the south, and the house of Joseph should continue in their territory in the north. Okay, so that means those two groups have already been decided. All right, so Judah has his space. West Manasseh and Ephraim have their space. Okay, that's decided. And then you skip down to verse 7. The Levites have no portion among you, for the priesthood of the Lord is their heritage. Okay, so we're not going to be making up any spots for the Levites here, so don't worry about them. That's taken care of. And then Gad and Reuben and the half-tribe of Manasseh, East Manasseh, have received their inheritance beyond the Jordan. Okay, so Gad, Reuben, East Manasseh, they're already taken care of, so we're not going to worry about them. So in other words, you're going to be going out and you're going to be dividing this land up in 7 portions for the 7 tribes that have not yet been given anything. 7 tribes, you are going to define these things, okay? So Joshua gives them a stake, sends them out, and they go out and they map out the space. And they went out, verse 8, and they went up and down the land, and he says, I will cast lots for you here before the Lord in Shiloh. Verse 9, so the men went and passed up and down the land and wrote in a book a description of it by towns in 7 divisions. So they went out, 3 from each tribe, so that's 21 men went out, traveled throughout the entirety of the space, and laid out a map as to what they thought the allocation should be. And then they came back to Joshua. Okay? So that's where you get to the end of this section. And there Joshua apportioned the land to the people of Israel to his portion, verse 10. All right, now it turns us then to the largest section of this 2 chapters, all of 18:11 to 19:48. And what you have in those verses are the allotments to the 7 tribes yet to have been allocated land. And it tells us in verse 11 that the lot falls first to the tribe of Benjamin. Now, let me just put a couple of notes into your mind here. Number one, I'm not going to exegete all of the boundary lines and city names in each of the 7 allocations. There's way too many verses to exegete, and frankly, it's beyond the scope of our ability since, as I've said, we don't really know where many of these places are. We don't really know exactly where the lines were drawn. Much of that is speculation. So the map that you have on the back of your bulletin will give you some clue as to where these tribes will be. But again, the actual location of the lines and the cities is subject to much discussion and debate. We're not really sure. But there's probably a pretty good approximation as to what you see there. A simple summary of the area for each tribe will be sufficient. The order of the tribes, as I said before, is determined by lot. Now, how the area for each tribe is determined is unknown. In other words, we don't know whether they got to choose which area they wanted when the lot fell for them, or whether the lot described both who went and where they were supposed to go. It doesn't say. The inclination for me would be that both the tribe and the space were allocated in some way by lot, because that's how it was done for Judah and Joseph, but I can't prove that per se. And there's a sense within me that I don't even believe what I just said, because, and again I'm struggling with it, because he had already told them to go and map out the land and draw it up in spaces, and so if he's giving that over to the Israelites, it doesn't seem that God particularly is worried about where the boundary lines are being drawn, because the men are doing that, although we could argue, of course, as Reformed people, that God managed them in such a way that they drew the lines the way he wanted them drawn, right? So it's hard to say exactly which of the case is true, but what we do know is that Benjamin gets the first spot mentioned here. The land allocated to Benjamin is between the people of Judah and the people of Joseph. It says that. Between the people of Judah and the people of Joseph in verse 11. It is in the space, sorry, I lost my train of thought there for a second. It is in the space of Ephraim. It is in the space of Ephraim, according to verse 11. So, somehow Benjamin is sandwiched between Judah to the south and Ephraim to the north, including the city of Jericho to the east. Note Jericho is mentioned in verse 21. Somehow Benjamin is sandwiched in between. Now, how the area around Ephraim came to be open for Benjamin and later Dan, as we'll see, is unknown. How is it that the space between these 2 tribes suddenly became a place for another tribe to go into? We don't really know the answer to that. What we do know is we have precedent to this, though. We know that Simeon, for example, will be allocated space within the territory of Judah. We'll see that next. The territory of Ephraim and Judah are carved out for these 2 tribes, but why is not specified here. It is possible that the space is being allocated because the space for Ephraim was also considered too large for them, and thus Benjamin and Dan are contained with and around it. In other words, it's almost as though the men said, as they went marching around, said, you know what, that space for Ephraim is way too big. There's some space down here that we should give away to another tribe, one of the other tribes, because if you remember the census in Numbers 26, Benjamin is a tribe of 45,600, whereas Ephraim is only 32,500. It's a smaller tribe by number, And the rule was that the larger the tribe, the larger the space, the smaller the tribe, the smaller the space. So it could be somehow that these men are sovereignly drawn to this idea of putting a tribe in between Ephraim and Judah. But I don't really know why. I don't really know why. But that's what happens. You'll notice on your map that Benjamin is sandwiched in between Judah and Ephraim. Now, it's important to note that Benjamin will be inextricably linked to Judah to the south by the days of David. By the days of David, Benjamin will virtually become a part of Judah. In fact, when Rehoboam, the idiot son of Solomon, decides to continue a taxation policy and the northern kingdom breaks away, it's 10 tribes to the north that break away, leaving Benjamin and Judah in the south together. And it's specifically noted in 2 Kings 12:21 that the two tribes are now one, in a sense. So the southern kingdom of Israel in the days of the divided monarchy includes the tribe of Benjamin with the tribe of Judah. And that is, of course, because the two tribes literally sit upon each other with Jerusalem straddling the border between them. And so they become inextricably linked together. The next tribe then that Lot falls for, starting in chapter 19 then, is Simeon. Now, in Numbers we discover, Numbers 26:14, we discover that Simeon is the smallest of the tribes at only 22,200 men. And it is inserted into the space of Judah. An area within Judah is carved out for Simeon because it says in verse 9 that the portion of the people of Judah was too large for them. As I mentioned earlier, it's possible that the same basic logic was made with Ephraim. The space is too large, let's put Benjamin in under Ephraim. But Simeon is also, for some reason, designed to fall into the space in the south previously granted to Judah. Now, it's not on your map, it's below the bottom of the map, but you can just sort of draw a circle in the middle of this very center of Judah, and that's where this tribe will wind out. This fulfills, by the way, the blessing of Jacob over Simeon and his brother Levi, although Levi's not involved in this situation. But this fulfills the blessing of Jacob over Simeon, when Jacob specifically says that Simeon would be scattered in Israel because he, along with Levi, was a man of violence. In the book of Genesis, Simeon and Levi were the two brothers who defended Dinah's honor after she had been assaulted by killing Hamor the Hivite. They had attacked Hamor and killed him, and that's mentioned in Genesis 34, which is then what Jacob is referring to in Genesis 49 when he speaks of Simeon being a man of violence. In other words, Simeon and Levi took matters into their own hands to bring justice upon who they thought had assaulted their sister. And so Jacob cast this blessing, quote unquote, upon Simeon, which is how this is which is fulfilled here. They are literally scattered within the tribe of Judah. Now, what we don't know is what happens to this tribe over time. The likelihood is good, however, that the tribe of Simeon slowly migrates north out of Judah over time. That some of the tribe is simply absorbed into Judah and becomes simply a part of it. But there's a sense also in which Simeon seems to have migrated north. The last historical reference to the tribe is 2 Chronicles 34:6, when it speaks of them being a part of the northern kingdom during the days of good King Josiah in 620 BC. Now, if you remember your dating, do you? The northern kingdom of Israel goes into captivity in 720, about 100 years earlier than good King Josiah. All that's left of Israel at this point is the southern kingdom of Judah. But Simeon is mentioned to the north, in that King Josiah goes and does some reforms in the northern part of what used to be Israel in his days. And Simeon is mentioned in the north. So that leads most scholars to believe that they simply migrated to the north and joined the northern kingdom, which explains, by the way, why it's 10 tribes in the north and 2 in the south. 2 being Benjamin and Judah, the other 10 including Simeon and all the other tribes. So they must have in some way moved north over time. Now, again, this migration would take quite a while. I mean, 620 is almost, let's see, what are we at here? We're at 1400. This is 800 years into the future when this is going to come. So that's plenty of time for this little tribe embedded within Judah to either be partially absorbed into Judah and disappear, and the rest of the people to migrate to the north. The next allocation is to Zebulun in verses 10 to 16. The next 4 tribes, including Zebulun, you will note, will cover the area to the far north. So all of the territory above what was allocated to Joseph, meaning to Ephraim and Manasseh, all of the territory to the far north, which is reaching all the way up to Lebanon and Syria. Judah covering the south of Canaan, the sons of Joseph in the middle, and these 4 tribes in the north. So Zebulun is the first of these 4 tribes. We learned from Numbers 26:7 that Zebulun is a tribe of 60,500 men, and they are allotted land in the area that will eventually become central Galilee in the days of Jesus, or more specifically in the days of the Roman Empire. It will be to the west of the Sea of Galilee, as you can see on your map. Next, the lot falls for Issachar, the second of these 4 tribes in the north, in verses 17 to 23. This is a tribe of about 64,300, virtually the same as Dan, which we'll see later. It is allotted land below Zebulun in the valley of Jezreel, west from the Jordan, below the Sea of Galilee. Again, in the northern part to below the Sea of Galilee. Then in verses 24 to 31, the allotment falls to Asher. Asher is a tribe of 53,400, and it is allotted land along the Mediterranean from West Manasseh north to the top of Canaan, up to what is referred to as Sidon the Great in verse 28. So they're getting the seacoast area up towards the very top of Canaan. Now, the top of Canaan is hard to define because we don't have national boundaries as we did in our day, but in those days it sort of just went north until they ran into somebody up there who said, okay, no further, this is it. Okay. The next tribe then is Naphtali in verses 32 to 39, the last of these 4 tribes to the north, a tribe of about 45,400 people, men I should say. It is allotted the inland territory east of Asher to the border of East Manasseh. So you'll notice it's up above, all the way up above Lake Huleh. Lake Huleh is the lake above the Sea of Galilee, from which the Jordan begins, which flows down into the Sea of Galilee and then exits the Sea of Galilee and flows down to the sea, down to the Dead Sea. Most people forget that there's another lake above the Sea of Galilee with another portion of the Jordan that runs up there. We forget about that spot up there. But you'll notice that the 2 tribes, this particular tribe, Naphtali, butts up against the eastern tribe of Manasseh on the other side in the Transjordan area. So they come together up there at the top, up above at the top of Canaan, up above. And then so those are the 4 at the top, Zebulun, Issachar, Asher, and Naphtali. And then there's one more allocation in verses 40 to 48, and that's the tribe of Dan. Dan is a tribe of 64,400, the second largest tribe in Israel. Judah is the first largest. Dan is the second largest tribe. And it is allotted land above Judah, like Benjamin earlier, above Judah, around Ephraim to the west, to West Manasseh to the north. So in that space, going to the sea, coming around Ephraim, and going up in that direction. Now again, how Dan became sandwiched between Judah and Joseph is unknown, especially given its size relative to the other tribes. In other words, if it's a tribe that's literally the second largest tribe in all of Israel, it should have had the second largest space, wouldn't you think, according to the rule that have been made. But let me point out something at this point. The numbers that you see in Numbers 26 are part of a census being done of the fighting men of each tribe. That's a bit misleading because that's not the size of the tribe itself. That's only the size of the fighting force that that particular tribe is able to put forward. It is possible that this count is somewhat deceptive as to its relative size, meaning that the description, that the number given might be, this is the number of men, but the multiplier that we would use to decide how many people then are in the totality of the tribe may be very different for Dan than for other tribes. In other words, maybe, in this case, the multiplier isn't 2.5 like we've been typically using for the other tribes. Maybe in this case it's 1 or 1.5, which would make the tribe itself, even though it has a large fighting force, smaller in sense than the other tribes. I need you to keep that in mind because our first reaction to the numbers we see in Numbers 26 is to say, well, this is the second largest tribe, so it should have the second largest amount of space. In other words, it should have all the space that Manasseh and Ephraim had, right? Because it's the second largest. But more than likely what is happening is the actual number of people that make up the clans of the tribe is what's being accounted for. And if you look very closely at the description of Dan given in Joshua 19, verses 40 to 48, it's actually quite small in the sense of what is given for it. It's quite small given for it compared to the others. Okay? So what we have is probably a more likely sense that the numbers in Numbers 26 are useful in terms of how many men can fight, but they don't necessarily tell us how many people are in the clan. So what we have is a sense in which at this point all the tribes are given their space, they're allotted their space. They've all been given their relative space based on the borders that have been defined for them. The lot has fallen and each of the tribes now has a specific space. So what you have on your map is a complete listing of where all the tribes will be, with the exception of Simeon, which is off the bottom of the picture. All right? Which leads us then to one final note that's added to this section in verses 49 to 51. 49 to 51. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm looking at my notes and I'm thinking, something doesn't make sense here. Okay? I made note in this, when it came to the size of Dan, that it's possible that Dan is actually one of the smaller tribes because, according to Numbers 26:42, there's only one clan listed. There's only one clan listed under Dan. If you look at all the other tribes in Numbers 26, there's a whole bunch of clans listed below that particular tribe. But in Dan's case, it's one verse in length, verse 42. Which includes the number of how many are there and the one clan that existed of it. That was my clue. I'm looking at my notes and going, this doesn't make sense because Joshua's got a lot more than that here. But what Joshua is recording is all the various places in the land that these people are going to live in. That's not the number of clans. The number of clans is listed in Numbers 26, and there's only one listed there. That's the clue, by the way, that gives me evidence that Dan was actually a very small tribe, even though it seemed to have a very large fighting force to go along with it. So apparently in Dan, over the last 400 years, the women had been producing fighting sons and not a whole lot of daughters. And so the result is a very small clan, single clan with a whole bunch of people in it that were fighting men. That's my guess. Okay, now to Joshua. All right. Sometimes you look at your notes and you go, verse 49 doesn't say that. Well, you got to read the book name next to it. All right, we come to one more addition here, and this is a pattern you will have noticed in the 3 sermons that I have done on the allotment of the land. You will notice that in each of these pericopes there has been not only a general allotment but also a specific allotment, or what we call a personal allotment that is made within the within the space of the general allotment. So this is the third personal allotment made in Canaan. Caleb received an allotment first, you remember? And then the daughters of Zelophehad last week got a allotment because their father didn't have any sons. And now there's another personal allotment being made as a part of this general allotment process. Now, it is highly likely, based on the language that Joshua uses to write this, that this was actually given to him as a gift. The Lord commanded the people of Israel to give Joseph an allotment of space. Does not appear that Joseph came to the people of Israel and said, "Hey, I've been working hard here, people, and I should get some territory. I mean, Caleb came and asked, so I should be able to come and ask because I was faithful like Caleb was." Doesn't appear that to be the case. The way it's written, you get the impression that God pokes the leaders of Israel and says, "Give Joshua some space too, because he deserves a special allotment." And so the people give it to him. When they had finished distributing the several territories of the land as inheritance, the people of Israel gave an inheritance among them to Joshua the son of Nun. By command of the Lord, they gave him the city that he asked. So they came to him and said, "We want to give you an allotment. The Lord has commanded us to give you an allotment. Where would you like to go?" And he says, "Well, that city named Timnath-Serah there, I'll take that in the hill country of Ephraim." Now, it's important to remember that Joshua's allotment, like Caleb's allotment and the daughters of Zelophehad's allotment, would be in the space of their tribal heritage. So Joshua, being from the house of Ephraim, would get a space in the territory of Ephraim. We know that Joshua is from Ephraim because it is mentioned that way in Numbers 13:8. It says then that he rebuilt the city and settled in it. Now, there's a couple different ways to understand this term rebuilt. All right. One possibility would be that it had been destroyed under the initial conquest when he had led the people in their initial conquests in the northern part of Canaan. It's possible that Joshua had come to this city and destroyed it, and thus now it would have to be rebuilt. That's one possibility, but there are others. There's another possibility, like Caleb's response, that it needed to be conquered by him, which he did. And then as he did it, then he rebuilt it based on destroying it and then rebuilding it, which is exactly what Caleb did when he said, "I'll go and live in this land. I know there's still Anakim in the land. I'll go in there and I'll overcome them because the Lord will give me the strength to do that, even though I'm 85 years old. I'll go in and do that." And it's possible that Joshua does exactly the same thing, that he goes in now to this native place and destroys it. Or the third possibility is that he simply built it as he saw fit in the place called Timnath-Serah. The place is also called Timnath-Heres in Judges 2:9, when it makes a similar reference to this place. It's possible that Joshua also simply said, "See that hill over there? There's a water source there, some good cropland. I'm going to build a city there. Give me that spot." Maybe there was no city there at all. He simply built it from the ground up. Or there may have been an ancient city there at some point and said, "I'll build a city on that spot." Any one of those possibilities are possible, right? Because they're possibilities. As I said, I think that Joshua mentions this only in passing. Okay, he doesn't want to draw attention to himself in writing the book, obviously. So he mentions this only in passing. The epitaph of the book, Joshua 24, indicates that he was ultimately buried in this city. So it's given to him and he goes and he takes it. The allotment is similar to the one made for Caleb. Although not expressly promised by God, Joshua's posterity is given an allotment because of his faithfulness to the Lord. You can almost hear it, can't you? Yahweh coming to the leadership of Israel and saying, "Just as Caleb was faithful, so my servant Joshua has been faithful to me. Therefore, give him an allotment of land of his choosing." A special allotment made to the man who had successfully led them into this very land itself. And it is a picture for us. Joshua is, as I said at the beginning of this book, and I've repeated a number of times, Joshua is a picture of Jesus, the coming Messiah, Christ, who would come to lead his people into a place of promise, a place of promised rest. An allotment of space that would be given to them in which they would find peace and prosperity with him as their leader. Joshua is a picture. In fact, even his name, Yeshua, is the same name. And so he's a picture of Jesus who is leading a people. So what do we do with this passage for us? This is the same question I've had the last couple of weeks as we looked at this allotment. It clearly directly does not impact us per se. There's none of us that are going to walk out of here and say, yeah, see that space between that barn over there and that's allotted to me because God has promised it to me. And that doesn't work that way. And that's not how we can take this. And there's no modern day application from an allotment of ancient Israel. We can metaphorically make some references to it, however. You will notice that these two chapters, 18 and 19, encompass about 60% of the total allotment of land in Canaan. 7 of the 12 tribes, or 355,800 fighting men out of 601,700. Both of those, by the way, come to about 68 to 69%, roughly 58 to 59%, about 60% of the allotment. So at the end of these allotments here in chapters 18 and 19, the people of Jacob have all received a portion of the land promised to Abraham 600 years earlier on both sides of the Jordan. Eastern side of the Jordan was never promised to Abraham, but nonetheless it was given. And so now you have the people of Jacob have all received an allotment of this space that was promised Abraham 600 years earlier. And as I was considering that this week, as I was thinking about that 60% number and thinking about how now all of these tribes have been given a space, everybody's been given their spot, they all know where they're going to live, they all know where the boundaries are, they all know where the city names are, they're going to be included in their space. It got me thinking of stuff. A verse popped into my head. Maybe it's just my own thinking, maybe it's the Spirit of God. It reminded me of Jesus' words when he regards the allotment of the kingdom for the elect. Here's his words: "Let not your hearts be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house are many rooms." King James uses the word mansions there. The word literally means dwelling places. In my Father's house are many dwelling places. If it were not so, I would have told you. For I go to prepare a place for you. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again, and I will take you to myself, that where I am, you may also be. Everyone in Israel has a place. Everyone in Israel now has a place. Everybody knows where they're going to go live. They may not have gone there yet, and we won't see them go there until you get to the first chapters of the book of Judges. But they know where. They have an allotted space. Every one of those who belong to Christ, who are his elect, will also receive a place. Now, I realize that the typical Baptist preacher here preaches this along very materialistic lines. When you die, you are going to go to heaven, and God has established for you a mansion, and this mansion is on streets paved with gold, and you're going to have this beautiful place to live, and your neighbors are going to be down the hill from you, hopefully. And you're going to have this wonderful place that you're going to live, and it's going to be wonderful. And every time I hear that, I've heard it 1,000 times if I've heard it once, my first thought that comes to mind is, am I going to be required to spend eternity dusting the furniture in this mansion? I mean, that doesn't sound like heaven to me. Now, again, the Baptist preacher typically talks about this in terms of physical locations in heaven, right? Mansions. And they love the King James translation because the word mansions, and I don't know why the King James translators chose to use the word mansions here. It's a completely arbitrary choice on their part. But you'll notice how that word, arbitrarily used, has become somewhat of a chyron in our own society. Yes, I'm going to get a mansion when I die. I watch Downton Abbey and I think, yeah, I want to live in that place. Only with modern plumbing and electricity. Or better, heavenly plumbing and electricity. Now, I agree that there is an element of physicality here. Deb and I laugh about that word because that seems to be the new word that every football commentator now uses. Well, look at that guy's physicality. They're all got physicality. There is a sense, the kingdom of heaven is a physical place. We need to get over this idea that we're just going to be spirit beings, with wings and harps and that, that's preposterous. That's not how the Bible speaks of us. We're human beings. God created Adam from the dust of the ground first and then breathed into him. His body was the first thing he formed. We're going to be physical creatures. We're going to be raised eternally in the resurrection to being human, and we're only human if we have a body. So there will be a material sense to heaven, no doubt of that. Beyond that, I cannot go because speculation would all be only what I can do. But the fact is, yes, there is a sense of physicality that will certainly be true, but there's probably a more figurative understanding of what Jesus says here about this place he's going to prepare. Jesus is also, I think, referring to his people being with him and his Father in the kingdom. The issue isn't about the fact that we will all have some material place to live in, but rather it is about that we will all have a place with him. That we will all have a place in his presence. In the presence of Almighty God. The human race has been cast from the presence of God by virtue of sin. God put an angel at the doorway to the garden to say you can't come in anymore and spend time with God in his physical presence because of sin. Christ has come in the present, in the physical sense, to bring God to us, such that then when he calls us to himself in the resurrection, we go to be with him. The issue isn't about some physicality. The issue is that we are with him. Receiving an allotment, a place with him in eternity. In the presence of Yahweh, to enjoy his magnificence, his beauty forevermore. That's why he says, I will take you to myself. See it? I will come again and take you to myself, that where I am, you might be also. Jesus isn't just speaking about taking you to heaven and then every once in a while showing up at the door of your mansion for lunch. No, he's talking about us coming into the presence of God, into the presence of Christ. Yes, into the physicality of Jesus, who is there in his resurrected body, and we will enjoy his presence forever. The elect are promised a place with him. Just as the people of Israel were promised a place, God said to Abraham, I'm giving you all this land. At this point in the narrative, now all these people know where that place is. We have exactly the same promise. We who are part of Jesus Christ by faith in him, we also have been allotted a place. We have an allotment of the kingdom of Christ where we will enjoy his inexhaustible loving presence. We will explore his unlimited nature as God, and will exercise our gifts in his infinitely created universe, all to his glory and our fulfillment. We will enjoy his inexhaustible loving presence. We will explore his unlimited nature as God, and we will exercise our gifts in his infinitely creative universe. So as we close the Thanksgiving season and move into the Advent season, it seems to me that it's very easy for us as humans to be thankful, or more specifically, to concentrate on giving thanks for those things we've already received. I imagine that if any of you said any sort of words of thankfulness at the holiday, more than likely, the vast majority of what you spoke of and were thankful for were things you already got, things you've already received. Now, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. Obviously, we should be grateful for all the things that we have received. And if you've been a part of Grace Fellowship Baptist Church for any amount of time and sat under my preaching at all and been awake, you would also be thankful for the many trials and tribulations and troubles and griefs and pains and difficulties that are also designed by a loving Father to mold us and make us even more ready for the kingdom. In other words, we're mostly thankful. We find ourselves, don't we, being thankful for what we already have. Thank you, Lord, for all the blessings that you've given to me. And yes, I'm even going to thank you for this pain that I have. I don't want to, but I'm going to, because the preacher says I'm supposed to. It's supposedly something about your will molding me into the image of Christ. But you will notice that we have a tendency to focus on gratitude for what we have already received. But it should also be normal for us. Notice I use the word normal. It should be normal for us to also be giving thanks to God for what we have not yet received. What we have not yet received. You see, the season of Advent is an anticipation, isn't it? But what is it exactly we're anticipating? Are we anticipating that there's going to be a child born in a manger somewhere in the Middle East in 6 weeks? No, that happened 2,000 years ago. We're not going to, technically in Advent, we're not anticipating the birth of the Christ, because the birth of the Christ happened long ago. He has already come. He has already lived. He has already gone to the cross. He has already been raised from the dead. He has already been seated at the Father's right hand. And the Father has already given to him all authority in heaven and on earth. And all of the nations of the world have been given to him to make a footstool for him. All those things have already happened. So what is it we're anticipating? We are anticipating the second coming of Christ. You see, when we celebrate Christmas, we celebrate Advent as an anticipation of a reminder of what has come, as a reminder of what will come. We're anticipating the day when Christ will call us forth from this world, either still alive and walking around or having been in a tomb. Either way, we're anticipating that day when Christ will call us forward and bring us to the place we rightly belong. The allotment that's been made for us. Listen, what you have, what you own, where you live, is not your allotment. It's easy to make the mistake, isn't it, thinking that this little space that I own, see, I got the mortgage paper to prove it, this little piece of paper, this little land, this is mine. That is not our allocation. We are sojourners and foreigners here. We belong to Christ. We belong to an allotment that's much greater than anything this world could ever give us. We are anticipating the day when we finally get to shed these temporal things and go to the true allotment that's been made. Him! The day when we get to look at him in the face and stand before him and he puts his arm around us and says, well done, good and faithful servant. That's what we're looking forward to. That's the allotment we're looking forward to. You see, the reprobate man has no allotment other than what he has in this world, which is why he will kill you to get your stuff, because that's all he's got. The only allotment he has is whatever he can scrape out of this world before he dies. But our allotment is in Christ, who is seated at the right hand of his Father. He has established a kingdom that gives us an allotment far greater than anything we can ever even imagine. So this should be a time of giving thanks for our eventual presence with Christ, the thankfulness born out of faith in the promises given to us in Christ. We are trusting what he has said. I go to prepare a place for you. If it weren't true, I'd have told you. But it's true. And where I go, you also will be, for I will bring you to myself. What a wonderful promise that is. And let me tell you, my friends, that promise is much greater than what Benjamin got in this list. It is an eternal promise that can never be shaken. The boundaries are known because Christ has drawn them. And where we go has been set in him.